All right, guys, welcome back dito sa latest reflection series or explainer series pagdating sa Pilipinas 360 degrees. Obviously, among our first episodes was with USEC Jeff from DICT. And USEC Jeff is someone I've been in conversation with for quite some time kung saan pinag-usapan natin itong impact ng artificial intelligence, algorithmic bias, itong tech wars between US and China, ano implication ng the rise of DeepSeek, ano pa yung mga cheap fake, deep fake, all sorts of different disinformation, AI-generated disinformation threats na hinaharap natin bilang isang demokrasya and as a relatively medium-sized country in the midst of superpower rivalry. So these are serious issues na kailangan natin bigyan ng pansin. Now, let me rewind a little bit and focus on the elections because in the previous explainer we had here, ang pinag-usapan natin in particular was the fact that sa aking palagay, mahalaga for progressive candidates. Let's just call them Team Pilipinas, right? Kasi parang laos na yung unit team eh. Pag sinamang unit team, sirang-sira na yung term na yan. Let's just call it Team Pilipinas. So Team Pilipinas refers to essentially any candidate out there. Wala akong pakialam kung sinong presidente ang binoto mo. But as long as klarong-klaro sa mga candidate na ito, ano yung karapatan natin sa West Philippine Sea. And not to mention, dapat klaro sa kanila, there is such thing as West Philippine Sea, right? Actually, I think you can Google map that. And obviously, when we talk about West Philippine Sea, and I can proudly say I was a small part of that history because in 2011, nung nagtatrabaho pa tayo sa Philippine Legislature, nakapasa ng Philippine Congress, particularly Dr. Bello back then, ng isang resolution essentially renaming our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf in the South China Sea as West Philippine Sea. So, hindi katulad ng ibang bansa, we're not claiming the entire South China Sea basin as ours. And we're not renaming the entire South China Sea as ours. So, West Philippine Sea only refers to our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf at most in that area. And when we talk about our exclusive economic zone and continental shelf, ito po ay base sa international law, in particular, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which, by the way, not only the Philippines and dozens of other countries, but also China has ratified, meaning pumasa ito sa kanilang National People's Congress, hindi lang sa kanilang executive agencies. Now, that's important because the United States Senate, because of its intransigence, because it's a superpower and it thinks that it can do whatever it wants, and in particular, may mga Republican dyan, year after year, decade after decade, na ayaw nila makipag-submit to any kind of an international scrutiny. They're so-called sovereigntists. They're so-called isolationists, whatever you want to call them. Some would call them imperialists. So actually, in the United States, hindi na-ratify ng kanilang Senado yung United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. But here is the catch. China has ratified the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. The US Senate has not ratified that. It goes without saying, in China, there's no such thing as an independent legislature. Pag sinabi ng Supremo nila, paramount leader, Xi Jinping, whatever, do this, the NPC is just a rubber stamp. In the US, hindi necessarily hawak ang presidente ang Senado. And let's see how things are going to go with second Trump administration. But we know time and again, the Republicans went against their own president, including Trump in his first iteration. And same thing could happen more and more in the coming months. So the US has a system of checks and balances and separation of powers. But here's the catch. Although the US has not ratified the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, the US government is a signatory and follows it as a matter of customary international law. Ibig sabihin, kahit hindi ito na-ratify ng ating Kongreso, in this case, the United States, dahil sang-ayon yung kanilang gobyerno dun sa provisions and precepts of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, they operationalize it. Meaning, yung US Navy, yung kanilang different assets, when they pass through international waters, they invoke and they comply with the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. For instance, ano yung mga karapatan mo within the contiguous zone or territorial sea of other countries? Ano yung pwede mong gawin or hindi mo pwedeng gawin sa exclusive economic zone of other countries? Now, mahabang usapan when it comes to military movement within the exclusive economic zone because there are certain countries like China, Brazil, India, I think Iran, for instance, who have a much more restrictive idea of right of innocent passage. So, for instance, what is the right of innocent passage? It means that kung ikaw isang foreign warship, you can pass through the exclusive economic zone of other countries just straight. If you're a little bit closer to their territorial waters or their baseline, you can also have a right of innocent passage, but you have to notify them at yung weapon systems may dapat hindi nakatutok sa kanila. So you should not be, you shouldn't have a threatening uh, passage close to their borders, etc., or not do intelligence gathering or espionage activities. Anyway, hindi ito lecture on UNCLOS. What I'm saying is, when it comes to the issue of West Philippine Sea, this is not like the Philippines ay nagfi-feeling tayo and we want to claim the entire South China Basin, South China Sea Basin as ours. No. Ang sinasabi lang natin, kung ang logic ng China is dahil ang pangalan ay South China Sea or East China Sea and basically treating all of that as their own blue national soil, that's the term they use in China, then perhaps we can have to fight back against that by also playing this naming game, except our naming game is grounded in international law, except our naming game is grounded in a basic understanding of prevailing international law. And as if that weren't enough, guys, actually, what we did over the past decade or so is that we tried to nest eto mga claims natin about the West Philippines, among others, in arbitration cases. So yung arbitration case natin, guys, in 2016, which we effectively started in 2013, first of all, guys, that was in response to yung bullying na nangyari sa atin sa Scarborough Shoal. But more important is because we just felt we had no other options, we had no other choices. So dahil binuli tayo sa West Philippine Sea, sa Scarborough Shoal, effectively nag-exercise ng administrative control ang China dyan. And because back then, during the Obama administration, quite diffident in US and unwilling sila to confront China. So what happened there is we felt we had to do something different. And eventually we decided to take China to international court. So we won that. We won that. Now, ibang usapan na if you want to look at thank you very much, sir. Ibang usapan na if you want to look at the issue of US commitment to us, mahabang usapan yan. But all I can say, guys, is since first Trump administration heading into the Biden administration and now the second Trump administration iteration, klarong-klaro na ang United States of America will come to the Philippines assistance if our troops, our aircrafts, and our warships ay inatake sa West Philippine Sea or in the South China Sea Basin in general. This was clarified in 2019 when then U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo was in Manila and made it absolutely clear na covered ang South China Sea and West Philippine Sea sa ating Mutual Defense Treaty and absolutely clear na covered ang any attack on our essentially public vessels, whether Coast Guard, whether Navy, on our aircrafts, dun sa ating mga Marines. Kaya nga, yung United States ay constantly nagpo-provide ng all sorts of different support to us and openly sinabi nila na they're willing to intervene and help us directly doon, for instance, sa ating patrol sa Ayungin Shoal. Because doon, meron tayong personnel. We have a de facto military base. Covered ito ng mutual defense treaty natin. So we have to be absolutely clear about those basic facts. Na US ay hindi nag-ratified ng UNCLOS, nevertheless, they follow it as customary international law. China, nag-ratify yan. They were part of the negotiations, multiple rounds of negotiation of UNCLOS, but they do not comply with it. They do not comply with it when we actually leverage the same international law that they agreed to question yung kanilang mumbo-jumbo argument na, yung mga panahon ng ganito-ganito, pumunta si ganito-ganyan. By the way, let me be absolutely clear. As someone who's a man of history, a student of history, Admiral Zhang He was actually not a Han Chinese. Most likely, he was a Persian-speaking guy, and his roots actually go to Central Asia, to the Persianite world, and he was a Muslim. In fact, one of the reasons why Admiral Zhang He, the most successful admiral in China's history, pre-modern history, Admiral Zhang He was able to visit not only Southeast Asia, but visited the Middle East and all is because he was Muslim And probably he could speak also Arabic, because if you're Muslim, especially back in the day, you should be able to read the scripture, Quran. So that means you have to know Arabic. So he had no problem, for instance, working with merchants, navigators from Yemen, from the Middle East. And that's why easily he could go all across the Indian Ocean, among other things. And speaking of Indian Ocean, of course, it will be ridiculous if India says, sa kanila lang Indian Ocean, and try to restrict other countries coming in. And if ever India is doing that, you have to push back against that. So, in short, etong issue ng West Philippine Sea is a question of yung ating karapatan, sovereign rights. When you say exclusive economic rights, meaning tayo lang pwede mag-exploit ng mga natural resources yan. Kaya nga exclusive right? Kung hayaan lang natin ng mga Chino at ibang bansa to just come in and get hundreds of millions of dollars of fishery resources and then bully us and prevent us from developing a kind of a alternative to the Malampaya plant, which is running out. Well, I don't understand what world is that okay. So dito, pupunta tayo sa itong issue na ito, Team China. Team China. I think this elections is important because klarong-klaro, the divide is not between, yes, say, House of Marcos versus House of Duterte and the rest. The divide basically is basically Team Philippines versus Team China. So Team Philippines is anyone, any candidate naniniwala dito sa ating karapatan sa West Philippine Sea base sa prevailing modern international law, not some haka-haka lang or yung mga mumbo-jumbo historic rights claim ng China na to me, to be honest, actually shows China's strategic narcissism or civilizational hubris. Basically, if you read in between the lines, ang sinasabi ng mga kaibigan natin sa China is because we are the oldest civilization. Eh, kayo naman, hindi naman kayo totoong bansa dati, mga colonial legacy lang kayo. Eh, kami, dumaan kami dyan, amin talaga tong area na to. Yung ganyan na mindset, right? That plus the fact that China wants to be a superpower, wants to control its adjacent waters, wants to push out China, and wants to eventually take over Taiwan. So lahat na yan ay mga factors which are driving modern China, People's Republic of China's approach in the West Philippine Sea. So for me, the very least na pwede natin i-expect sa isang kandidato sa midterm elections ay unang-una, hindi niya i-question yung West Philippine Sea. Or if questioning West Philippine Sea, by the way, I'm an academic. We can go Derrida, we can talk about deconstruction, we can talk about Benedict Anderson and imagined communities. Pero ito ang problema ko. You question the West Philippine Sea, you question UNCLOS and Arbitration Award using Derrida, deconstruction, blah, 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 scholarly, kind of approach, but you don't question China's 9-dash line. You don't question China's 10-dash line. You don't question China's 11-dash line, which includes both Gulf of Tonkin and Pratas Islands, which is, by the way, controlled by Taiwan when it comes to Pratas Islands. You question our social construction of West Philippine Sea legislation, but you do not question China's weaponization of law and coming up with their own unilateral, aggressive claims dyan sa West Philippine Sea. Ay, may problema ako dyan. Lalong-lalo na kung yung ibang kaibigan natin ay nagpapanggap na professor sila or expert sila. Ako po ay hindi ako senior professor, but I have taught full-time at LaSalle and part-time in Ateneo and UP, and I'm proud of that, right? And for me, my credentials ultimately are not just my teaching stint. My credentials that I've produced multiple books on South China Sea disputes na academically published, meaning dumaan ito sa butas ng karayo. Ibig sabihin, I had to interview dozens of leading experts from Germany, from US, including looking at the studies by and works of some of the Chinese legal scholars, not to mention our own experts here in the Philippines, Justice Scarpio, J. Batumbakal, who has a PhD in maritime international law, relevant to maritime international law. So what I'm saying here is that dapat may mga bare minimums tayo na hiningi sa ating mga kandidato. So, unang-una, if meron mga kandidato dyan na they're even questioning the West Philippine Sea or attacking Vietnam and saying, oh, Vietnam, blah, blah, blah. Even if, by the way, Vietnam, yes, we have had problems in Vietnam in the past, in the 1970s and 80s, right? They took over some of the islands that we were claiming or occupying temporarily. That's true. And Vietnam, of course, it's true that Vietnam is also building military facilities. But by the way, Vietnam is not doing those things within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines today, building militarized islands, etc. At they're not using their warships, their monster coast guard ships to bully us. That's not true. They have some illegal fishing in our area, but these are small scale compared to what China does. So, sobrang suspicious talaga sa akin when I hear certain political candidates, napakagaling mag-criticize ng Vietnam, napakagaling mag-deconstruct, mag-dekada, mag-postmodernism, whatever. Pagdating sa West Philippine Sea, imagine communities and feeling Benedict Anderson in terms of sociological analysis of this issue. Pero halos wala silang sinasabi sa mga mumbo-jumbo claims ng China na 9-line, 10-line, 11-line. Halos wala silang sinasabi whatsoever about the questionable basis of China's claim. Ang galing nila mag-criticize ng US na hindi nag-ratify dahil pasaway yung mga Republicans, pasaway yung ibang senador nila. At yes, there's any kind of an imperialist, isolationist, Jacksonian tradition there. Pero hindi sila nagsasabi na bakit ang China nag-ratify ng UNCLOS ay very selective yung kanyang respeto sa international law. And when international law goes against their interests, they don't say anything like that. Absolutely, let's be clear. The United States of America, as a global empire, has done a lot of things that I completely condemn. They have invaded countries right and left. They have conducted drone operations right and left. They have done a lot of things that we can criticize. Rest, no problem. But you just criticize US, but you don't criticize the other superpower. China is a superpower. Russia is a superpower. So para sa akin, may problema ka talaga. Kung isang tao ay nagka-claim na, hindi, ano lang yun, scholarly discussion lang yan. Or hindi, makabayan ako eh. Tinatanong ko lang yan dahil fair question. No, 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 no. I think politically motivated yung ibang tao. And probably worse, hindi lang sila politically motivated, politically influenced na ibang tao. Dito papasok yung concept ng malign foreign interference. Ano ibig sabihin ng malign foreign interference? Ibig sabihin dyan, may mga kaibigan tayo dyan, whether kandidato or hindi, na mukhang there could be a money trail or there could be some sort of quid pro quo with the foreign power to say, etong gawin mo or etong hindi mo sasabihin. And let's not forget, we have some very senior official na halos wala pa siyang sinabi about West Philippine Sea at all. Ang dami niyang sinabi about conflict in Gaza. Ang dami niyang sinabi about kung ano-anong issue all around the world, about Afghan refugees passing through the Philippines. Pero pagdating sa West Philippine Sea, walang sinabi. Oh, not to mention, nag-Mandarin pa yata nung isang year to greet, I don't know, China on this and that. Na hindi ko alam if I can even call that Mandarin. I asked my Chinese friends, naintindihan niyo ba yung sinabi niya? Parang, anong nangyari is like, French language, right? Yeah, like, for instance, the word Bourdieu, right? Or Rousseau. It's like you're reading it as it's written, Rossiao or Bordeaux. Parang ganun daw yung dating ng Mandarin ni ate. But anyway, hindi ko alam kung nag-order sa Chowking or hindi. But do you get what I'm saying? So for me, wala akong problema na i-criticize mo yung government. I do that all the time. Sa tingin mo, hindi magandang strategy nila. Sa tingin mo, sablay sila. Sa tingin mo, masyado tayong dependent sa US. Be my guest, 100%. Pero kung parating argument mo lang isang side lang, and worse, yung argument mo ay parang copy-paste halos ng talking points ng isang embahada sa Pilipinas, ay medyo may problema tayo dyan. So, actually, there was a survey last year pa lang na sinabi niya na more than 7, in fact, almost 8 out of 10 Filipinos ay hindi daw boboto sa mga pro-China candidates. Kitang-kita din natin ang surveys in SWS, Pulse Asia, Okta throughout the years, among others, na lampas sa 7 or 8 out of 10 Filipinos want the Philippines to take a tough stance on the West Philippine Sea. And yet, you have a couple of candidates, not only in one camp, actually yung iba nasa ibang camp pa, na parang napaka-questionable yung kanilang stance or walang stance sa West Philippine Sea issue, which puts into question what the heck is going on there. And let me be absolutely clear, hindi pwedeng, thank you, hindi pwedeng ganun yan. Pag tinanong ka ukol sa issue ng West Philippine Sea, hindi pwedeng thank you, or pa-cute. Dapat sumagot ka. Anong stand mo sa West Philippine Sea at anong dapat gawin natin? Dapat sumisingil tayo. Wala akong pake kung anong team yan. Whether pink yan, whether alyansa yan, whether PDP laban yan. Pag etong kandidato ay walang sinasabing relevant in support of the West Philippine Sea, kung nagpapakyut lang or nagdigress or nagdidistract, or worse, essentially echoing the pro-China talking points, ika-call out po natin yan. Because To be honest, hindi natin kailangan mag-name drop. There are a couple of candidates out there who are doing quite well. So one of them could even top the race in Senate. And then there are two or three others na may chance within Magic 12. And then pag tinignan mo kanilang track record, unang-una, halos wala silang sinabi in terms of resisting yung mga worst instincts ng dating administration when Duterte was almost saying to China, he half jokingly, I'll use the word half, jokingly said, make us a province of China. Duterte openly said, walang kakwento-kwenta, piece of paper lang yung ating arbitration award. Ano yung sinabi ng mga taong yan? So there are a lot of people are very questionable dun sa kanilang commitment sa ating karapatan dyan sa West Philippine Sea. Basically, questionable commitment sa ating national interest. And these people do not deserve to be in office. These people do not deserve to be elected. So, kaya catchword na lang natin sa kanila, I think China, right? So this is just not one group. It's a couple of candidates who are not stepping up to the plate. Kaya talagang trabaho po natin bilang mga ordinary citizens, trabaho po natin bilang voters, to vote for candidates who at least have a degree of conscience and clarity dun sa mga basic na ating mga sovereign rights sa West Philippine Sea. At of course, wag natin kalimutan yung mga ating mga mangingisda, yung mga ating mga sundalo, yung ating mga Coast Guard members na they're risking their lives every single day to either earn a living or to protektahan yung ating karagatan, no? Protektahan yung West Philippine Sea. The Philippine Coast Guard constantly going toe-to-toe with China, including their monster Coast Guard ships, which are bigger than warships of almost all countries in the region, right? Yung Philippine Navy, naputulan pa ng daliri yung ibang mga ating mga bayani dahil po ay, they had altercation, right? Actually, hindi nga sila altercation, they just resisted. Hindi sila lumaban. At na-injure sila ng mga yung mga dayuhan dun sa showdown on Ayungin Shoal at some point last year, right? Thankfully, wala nang mga incidents na bago nangyari. But that's because the Philippine government, hindi lang tuloy-tuloy yung transparency initiative kung saan binubuking natin yung mga bullying na nangyayari sa West Philippine Sea. But more importantly, pinakita natin na we have the willpower to stand up. We have the national will to stand up. Ang kailangan lang kasi natin dito is a more whole-of-nation approach. Hindi tayo pwede umasa sa gobyerno lang to do everything. Dapat supportive ang civil society. If we are a strong nation, if we can work together, if different sectors of the society can come together and work together with the government, right? On good issues like protecting yung West Philippine Sea, yung ating karagatan, yung ating mga interest dyan, ating mga fishing community and fishing folks, then I think other countries, including superpowers, will think twice before bullying us, right? In fact, I keep on hearing the Philippines will be the next Ukraine. Medyo, sorry, bobo yung argument na yan in the sense that alam ko ang implication na yan is, you want to be kawawang Ukraine, ganyan. Actually, Ukraine embarrassed Russia like hell. Russia has more than 500,000 casualties. It's supposed to be a superpower. Bugbog sarado sila sa Ukraine. And Ukraine is not even a US ally and they got what? More than $100 billion in defense aid. Tayo, treaty ally. Tayo, hindi nga tayo immediate neighbor ng China. Hindi naman tayo susugay ng China na madali na ganyan lang. Taiwan is a different issue. And if Ukraine was able to give a bloody nose to Russia, 500,000 of casualties in a year or two of war, if Ukraine na hindi US ally was able to get $100 billion in assistance from US alone, then actually it's even more encouraging to us in the Philippines. And I'll tell you, from a technical standpoint, we also saw how NATO-grade weapon systems are very effective against Russian Soviet weapon systems, right? We can talk about HIMARS. We can talk about the Javelin systems. We can talk about some of the drones that Ukraine developed. For instance, they have one drone systems kung saan they use a kind of a maritime drone, and then they use that maritime drone as a launch pad for a ground attack drone. So actually, Ukraine should be an inspirational case. What I say is this: China should make sure that they don't end up like Russia, a humiliated paper tiger or paper bear, right? So at the end of the day, para sa akin, this is a question of national interest. This is a question of national dignity. And this is a question of calling out. I won't use the word traidor, pero I want to use also the word makapili, right? Ito yung mga nag-defect kasi. But we have to really call out because I think so far ang focus natin in troll farms. yung mga bayaran na vloggers na obviously bayaran 'tong mga 'to, almost exact yung kanilang talking points, almost exact yung direction ng argument nila. Marami diyan ngayon last time I checked biglang nasa Beijing ngayon, biglang may scholarship, biglang may fellowship. Um, yung iba sa kanila, kunyari daw professor or expert, 'pag pumunta ka sa Google Scholar, zero publication, no relevant publication, is as fake as it can get. So obviously mga front lang 'to, mga fake lang 'tong mga 'to. And then there are also this really literally troll farms just echoing what they're saying and then patawa sila, i-emoji-emoji ka nila, atake nila yung mga post natin, although good luck sa inyo. Wala namang silbi yung mga ginagawa niyo, tumataas lang engagement natin. So, going back to this, I think it's absolutely important to call out Team China candidates or to call out candidates who are not Team Philippines enough. And I think that should be one of the core issues in these midterm elections. And one of the issues that should separate candidates who deserve to be elected and candidates who shouldn't be elected. One last point I want to say on this. Isa sa pinakamalungkot na bagay na nakita natin sa Pilipinas ay itong idea na national office is basically all about fame and kung ang puso mo ay nandyan. So you know which candidate I'm talking about. So we have a certain candidate over the past few days na sinasabi niya, "Oo, totoo na wala akong alam sa batas." Tapos yung tinanong pa nga, "Anong batas ang gusto mo?" "Ikaw, tanungin kita, anong batas ang gusto mo ilagay ko?" Tapos, sir, hindi naman ako tumatakbo." Hindi, sabihin mo sa akin, ikaw nga." Parang, alam mo, ito yung parang mga estudyante na tinanong mo, hindi alam yung sagot, tapos ibabalik pa yung sagot sa'yo, tapos galit pa sa'yo. "Hindi ma'am, bakit mo tinanong sa akin yan ma'am?" "Hindi ma'am, sagutin mo nga ma'am, bakit mo tinanong?" Medyo hindi natin kaya yung mga ganyan style. So, si kuya yata nafe-feel niya na may chance talaga siya na malaki maging senador, eh. At, hanggang ngayon biglang sabihin, "Ay hindi, actually kailangan ko pala pag-aralan yung Sara impeachment. Ay, actually hindi ko yata alam anong batas na kailangan ko." Pero sasabihin niya, "Pero hindi ko rin alam maging corrupt. Hindi ko rin alam maging ganyan, ganyan, ganyan. Pero dahil I don't know, artista ako or whatever ako, kilala ko yung mga tao, ganyan, ganyan." Like, eto lang sasabihin ko, um, parang basketball 'yan, eh. Nung panahon na yung gilas ay purong puso lang, wala po nangyari. Dahil puso doesn't get you Asian Championship. Kailangan mo ng competence. Kailangan mo ng magaling na coach. Kailangan mo ng diskarte. The same thing applies when it comes to running for a national office. And by the way, last time I checked, being senador is not about bigyan mo ng jacket. Hindi ito charity office. Hindi ito yung nagaganin ka ng suklay ka ng ano mo, di ba? I mean, okay, let's just call it out. How many more Robin Hood Padilla types we need in the Senate to save us? Right? How many more itong mga artista na may puso and also hindi po sapat ang puso. Kung purong puso ka lang, mangyari sa atin yung nangyari sa Gilas dati na purong talo sa quarterfinals pa lang gano'n. Kailangan may magaling kang coach. Kailangan may diskarte ka. Competence po ang issue dito. So para sa akin, not only should we call out yung pro-China candidates or not patriotic enough candidates, we should call out yung ibang kandidato na dahil lang sikat sila or kilala sila, feeling nila entitled sila. And then, mas shameless pa nga. In fairness, to be fair to Robin Hood Padilla, nagpapanggap pa siya na expert siya sa parliamentary politics. I remember very well nung tumatakbo siya, hindi ko siya siniseryosa kasi naman thought he'll top the race, di ba? Akala namin si Rafi Tulfo or whatever. Tinatag pa niya ako on Facebook about yung mga arguments ng parliamentary system. Tapos pinagtawanan ko lang. Well, I still continue to laugh at a lot of his things he's doing, but I'm sure, ganito I think Robin Hood Padilla's heart is in the right place. I was actually happy that someone, well, he's a Muslim now, di ba? So, someone from I don't know, different religious background, para may blah, blah, blah. Etong ibang tumatakbo ngayon, they don't even bother. They don't even pretend. Buti pa si Robin Hood, may pretension pa siya. Kaya ginawa pa siyang, di ba, yung head of Committee on Constitutional Amendments. For heaven's sake, right? Dahil at least nagpanggap siya na may alam siya at may paki siya sa issues ng constitutional change. Etong ibang tumatakbo ngayon, parang, ikaw, sabihin mo sa akin, ang gusto mong batas gusto ko. So, I think it's absolutely important for us to also call out these things. Because I'll be honest, guys, good luck sa Pilipinas. I mean, we're talking about on this show, you're gonna see very intelligent conversation with non-elected people as USECs and secretaries who are there because of their merit. No one is perfect. But you could see, for instance, in my interviews with many government officials, whether from National Security Council, from DICT, you'll see more from NEDA, DOF. Itong mga tao po yan ay nag-aral, pinag-aralan yung sinasabi nila. This is not about elitism. It's about merit. It's about competence. And if we allow anyone to just be, I don't know, senator or whatever, kasi yung puso lang niya nasa, bakit wala bang, lahat naman tayo may pagmamahal tayo sa bayan eh, di ba? Ang issue dito, meron ka bang competence? And it's not, again, an issue of IQ or nag-ano ka ba, Ivy League school ka ba? Or, no, it's not about that. It's about, did you do your assignment? Did you try to improve yourself? For heaven's sake, are you good enough to be able to be a fiscalizer sa Senado? Balita ko patapos na tayo. I mean, this is funny but actually it's tragic. Hindi ko na sasabihin sino mga senador na yan. Yung isang Senate daw last time. Di ba nag-English pa yung mga iba na sa harap? Well, sabi nga ni Robin Padilla, di naman daw tayo Amerikano. Except last time I checked, official language pa rin natin ang Ingles. At kung hindi ka marunong mag-English, good luck sa'yo abroad. In fact, I'm trying to learn my Spanish more. I'm trying to go back on my French. Mandarin is a bit too hard for me. But honestly, I realized even knowing English alone is not enough to make me competitive. I have to learn other. Tapos ito sasabihin niya, hindi ko kailangan mag-English dahil Pilipino ako. I mean, I speak Ilocano. I'm proud to be able to speak Ilocano. My point is, yeah, my point here is, let's call out this culture of mediocrity and pasikat and pa-cute and all of that and really make the baselines clear. Hindi pwede na traidor or hindi pwede na incompetent, hindi pwede purong puso lang at pagmamahal. We have had, how many celebrities pa meron na? I mean, I can name other names, pero wag na, dami natin kalaban. Ang dami pang iba. Ilan pa bang artistang kailangan natin sa Senado para iligtas ang ating minamahal na bayan? No, we need competence. So speaking of that kwento, meron daw, I don't know, it was, so you can guess which Congress this is. Was this Franklin Drilon, I think. Former Senator Franklin Drilon. He was giving a talk and it was a little bit technical and high-minded and all. Tapos yung sa likod daw yung isang senador, anong sinasabi? Tapos yung isang, huwag kang magulo, nakikinig ako. Yung ganun daw yung nangyari. At kasi kung pumunta ka sa Senate, may mga may mga upuan doon sa mga tao. So nakikita daw ng mga tao. Ano daw sinabi niya? Tapos yung mga Latin terms, huwag kang magulo, nakikinig ako kasi nakikita na, it's just so ridiculous. Now we allowed for certain people to get there who are not even proficient in the basic language of, you don't need to be a lawyer, but at least the basic language of legalistic discourse. Hindi abogado si Tito Soto. Hindi abogado si Trillanes. Hindi abogado si Riza Ontiveros. Right? You don't need to be a lawyer. And ang daming lawyer, Panelo, ang daming lawyer sa pwede kong pangalanan na medyo, right? It's not about being a lawyer or constitutional law expert. It's about having just basic proficiency and basic competence. Hindi po ito elitism. So nakakalungkot po, nang nangyari sa ating bansa is ginawang popularity contest. Time and again, I hear, si Inday naman, naka 30 million votes. Si Digong naman, 90% approval. Hindi po popularity context ang demokrasya. Democracy is about accountability. And democracy is about competence. And going back to our discussion earlier, democracy is also about patriotism. You care about the Philippines and our national interest, or are just there to make money, or just there for the fun or the fame or midlife crisis ka na yung gusto mo na maging relevant. We should not vote for those kinds of candidates. Kailangan ba natin pangalanan mga taong mga to? Of course, we don't. Although sabi nung isa, bigla, may mga last minute, bigla nag-change plan yung isa. Sabi niya, bakit? Di ako nga, handa ako patayan dyan sa West Philippine Sea. Ito isang tao na, na walang sinabi nung time na sinabi ni Digong na yung mga naniwala sa kanyang jet ski sa West Philippine Sea ay medyo diba? Ito yung mga tao na sinuportahan si Digong year after year after year when he was kowtowing to China, basically. All right. On that note, before we make more enemies, more bashers, let me just say, good luck sa atin, good luck sa inyo, and hope, right? This election moves in the right direction. Because if you look at some of the surveys, including some of the more live analytics-driven surveys, AI-driven surveys, very competitive and race na ito. Kiko and Bam have a chance. A lot of good candidates have a chance, but also a lot of bad candidates not only have a chance, they could even top the Senate race and make an argument for the presidency. And that's the nightmare scenario you want to avoid. The bigger nightmare is having more clown show, supposedly at the highest chamber of our land. On that note, thank you very much and welcome back to the latest episode of 360 Degrees Pilipinas.